people will say, well, your work is social commentary or social art. And I'll say, no, but I am socially expressive, and social protest is within the many things that people do to be socially expressive. Some people dance to be socially expressive. You know, some people come up and kiss each other on the cheek to be socially expressive. Others will kick somebody in the behind to be socially expressive. Well, in sculpture, you can have that range of variety as well. In a funny way, it's quite simple. You can buy steel in all kinds of forms. Probably the most common material in the world for human use is steel. And it's been significant for a long time as tool or as implement or nails, connectors, all kinds of forms. And what those forms do look different because they have different purposes of being. And then what purposes I transpose them to is more important. In other words, for me, it's more important what I end up with than what the objects actually are before. You know, it's like a painter. One painter buys house paint and he paints a house. And another buys house paint and he makes paintings, you know. But the truth is, the overall finished form is very much my interest. It's like in music. I would be very much a composer rather than a lyricist. I was experimenting, trying to find my way with the material and with the processes. And in doing that, I had been painting and also trying to fold in ideas of the world and predicament in which I lived. But I didn't want to be an illustrator. So, you know, it was more, my approach, probably the easiest artistic way to say it, was poetic and free in its form by then. In that respect, I started to find from these little, literally on the welding table, flat or relief kind of developments. And then, I guess in 1963, the first of what I later called the Lynch fragments, because there were no titles, there was no theme in the beginning, but the thematic, poetic area, and I say poetic, though you might say socially expressive dynamics, or within the aesthetics of my work, they kind of all mixed and fused, and sometimes the work itself suggested things. And after the piece, which later was named Some Bright Morning, when I finished that work, or felt it was finished, I says, I think I've got something in my own set of ideas. And that would give me more than itself. In other words, not imitations of it, but conceptual ways of thinking of sign, symbol, physicality, three-dimensionality. A similar piece made not long afterwards is the piece that's here in the collection of the museum, which is titled Hers. And that title came from the fact that in relation to lynching, it happened to women as much to men. And in any case, anybody brutalized to intimidate a society, what that intention is to intimidate everybody. And a part of the reason that I called the works the Lynch fragments was I felt that I needed to be as strong and as expressive as reality was in its attempt to intimidate and suppress, you know, our people. And of course, there were plenty of examples. Sometimes I named pieces after people who I admired, or concepts or incidents, history, or my imagination. One piece is called, one of the early ones is called Mojo for 1404. Well, 1404 was my family's address in Houston. As a visual artist, I felt that I should be able to find ways to move ahead. Consequently, the moving of the works into suspension and space, and eventually to straight line and regular counting points that form the structures for the barbed wire works, they fit very nicely in my head, but the opportunities to exhibit those ideas were rare. My own feelings were, nobody's doing anything like this. Even the Lynch fragments had their uniqueness, but the barbed wire works were just beyond minimalism, beyond almost anything that had been going on, and yet it could be discussed in the most modern of terms, if you will. Anna was in 1970, she was my 10-year-old daughter, and I was making these, if you will, site-based or environment-based works. And I thought I could make a corner, and when I realized that, well, if I do it in this simple, direct way, it's a prism, P-R-I-S-M. But I'm one who plays with words, and fairly quickly it was prison. And then it became Anna's Corner because as a little girl, when she misbehaved, and I didn't spank her, but I would put her in a corner, which she resented very much, you know. And so it was, in a sense, an homage to the relationship between my daughter and I, as far as the titling. As far as the poetic and political ramifications, well, putting a person in prison was a very common experience for the people who were in the civil rights movement. You know, you name them, they had been to prison. I'd never been to prison. And if you're going to see the world more completely, you might want to see it through a prism. You know, so all of those were my thoughts. But the simple way to title it, to give it a name, was simply Anna's Corner. Truthfully, I like making art. All my life, I liked the challenge of making art. The word career, which seemed to show up later, didn't exist. In that era, you lived your life in relation to the reality of the society you lived in.